唔係被動嘅學習，強調知識嘅建構，而唔係接收已有嘅成果。重視鼓勵學生面對真實世界，學會挖掘問題、建構問題、提出假設，做一啲相應嘅調研，揾出解決問題嘅方案，並且動手去解決。喺呢種學習過程裏面，學生嘅思維能力、溝通能力、協作、創意、解難、執行能力等等，都會得到全面嘅發展。而呢啲正好就係發展全球視野同埋回應人工智能時代嘅各種必備條件。
對未來迷茫的家長和學生們，您會給出什麼樣的建議呢？
有一點要先強調啊，教育主要面對嘅係未來，係為下一代面對未來做好準備。由於我哋要培養下一代面對未來嘅挑戰，作為家長，我哋一定要放下自己個人嘅經驗積累嘅成見。以前我哋唔係好重視嘅能力，日後可能會成為成功嘅關鍵。所以家長要從呢個角度去重新思考，你對你嘅子女教育嘅要求究竟應該係點樣？至於學生方面，我想借用孔子一句話：君子不器。器指嘅係專門用途嘅器具，我哋唔應該好似器具咁樣被塑造為只有某種專門用途而唔能夠改變嘅工具。所以作為學生，你哋要培養多元開放嘅學習興趣，對唔同嘅事物都要有好奇心，要培養終身學習嘅習慣，尤其是閱讀嘅習慣。咁樣你先至會有足夠嘅適應能力，胸襟視野，因應唔同嘅情況，做出相應而恰當嘅改變。喺日新月異嘅世界裏面，做到大學裏面講嘅一句說話：9日新，1日新，又日新。
Good evening and welcome to the parent webinar, Disconnect to Connect, Understanding Our Children Today. My name is Julia Kortt and I am the Senior Curriculum Officer for our YCYW Education Network. Before we begin this evening, I'd like you to take a moment, sit back and think about the image you see on your screen. When is the last time you looked around and thought, how connected am I to my children, to my family, to my friends, to my work colleagues, and the wider community? Join us while we start to explore this topic together. Tonight we are going to hear from some highlights from Senior Lecturer at MIT, Peter Senge. Peter is known in the business world for his work in learning organisations and systems thinking. He is the author of The Fifth Discipline, and Harvard Business Review named his book as one of the most influential management books of the last 75 years. He has shared the driving principles of organisational learning with business, education, healthcare and government. Throughout his career, Peter has been asking, how do we create conditions for people to work together at their best, cultivating their innate systems intelligence that is our birthright, but is all but lost in modern culture. On the other hand, we're also going to hear some interview highlights from our 3 Year 10 students from Hong Kong, Donald, Chloe and Ravelli. Donald, Chloe and Ravelli have been working with me through different leadership opportunities connected to Peter's most recent work of blending together system thinking with relational awareness, called Compassionate Systems. Donald and Ravelli joined the Yuchung family in K2, whereas Chloe joined us at the start of Year 7. The perspectives of these 3 young people are very impressive. This evening, we will unpack 3 questions with Peter and our Year 10 students. First, what does it mean to be present? Second, why are we disconnecting? And thirdly, what are some of the thoughts from today's youth? In addition, we will also share some strategies from Peter, our students, and suggestions from universities such as Harvard and University of Illinois in Chicago on these questions. For the past 20 years, I have worked as a global educator. I've been working with students from Australia, Switzerland, our Yucheng School in Shanghai and down in Hong Kong, as well as volunteering for an orphanage in Vietnam. And one commonality that all children around the world at any age crave is love. This is why at YCYW we understand the importance of love as a core aspect for human connection, and it is part of our life skills and wellness curriculum from our YCYW 12 virtues. We define it as having connection between one heart and another, showing attraction, affection, and caring for a person, a place, an idea, and for life itself. The first 3 statements of the YCYW principles and practices emphasises the importance of character, uniqueness, and relationships with our children. We know that it is through our partnerships with our parents and these principles that helps our children to feel loved and connected within all our schools. And as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. This past year, I've been working with Peter and his team on the idea of profound interconnectedness of self, other, society, and the larger natural world, and how they are all interconnected relationships. And this is what helps build our future. So let's hear Peter's perspective on what does it mean to be present.
Clear to people, one, that everything we do at its best needs to be developmental. It's not about an answer. I mean, this is the problem with a lot of contemporary education. It became about answers rather than about developing human beings. And that means adults and kids, and that means parents and families, and it means communities. It's this kind of network of relationships. The essence of any relationship, I think the simplest way to to get at the heart of your question is just to think of a conversation where you feel listened to. I mean, it's a very real experience. It's often missing. You know, social media is almost the antithesis often. You say a few trigger words and all people are doing is reacting to those trigger words. They may understand the statement, but they don't understand the person making the statement. So we know in any conversation, there's always these 2 levels. You might say there's the content, there's what we're saying, but there's that relational level that we might say is the holder or the container. So when we feel listened to, we feel that someone is not only paying attention to what we say, they're paying attention to the lived experience behind the words. So that's a really good example to me of how presence manifests. In a conversation, we're either present or we're not. Almost always we're not. We react to a word, or we understand, like in a debate, you're trying to understand what a person says so you can make your point, but you're not really listening to the person. You're trying to kind of analyze the words. So I think this is a really good illustration of what it means to be present. You might say this is a real question. What does it mean to be present? At all 3 fundamental levels, we always call them the fundamental levels of systemness or relationship. The interpersonal, the you and I conversation, the intrapersonal, what does it mean to be present to me? And then larger, the school, the community, ultimately the earth, the ecosystem. So you can talk about what does it mean to be present at all 3 levels, but in some ways it's easiest to get it anchored and start to understand it at that interpersonal level, because we do all know emotionally what it feels like to be listened to. And sadly, we know what it feels like to not be listened to.
At YCYW, we value hearing what our students have to say. So now let's turn over to our Year 10 students and hear their thoughts on what does it mean to be present.
I think present, the word that connects with present to me, like immediately, is support. So I feel like it's a double-sided support. You gotta support your parents while the parents gotta support you as well. No matter in education, as in like I'm facing pressure in my academics. Parents, although you could teach me, you could actually give me some solutions. But then the more I care about is that you understand me. You understand what I'm going through. That's what I think I'm more focused in, like emotional connection in this case, because I value support a lot. I could feel encouraged when parents kind of like, oh, praise me, or like, oh, support me, yeah, you're doing very well, and oh, congratulations, and all that. It actually means a lot to me. So I feel like support is a very big part in it as well.
Yeah, maybe adding on to support, it might not just be like parents, also friends, yeah? So for example, if you're friends and you have any like issues that they're going through, again with what Chloe said, it's really important to support them, to show up for them. Showing up might not be, again, physically, it might be also just emotionally, and this is, for me, I think listening to their problems just helps them a lot and supports them. Yeah.
Leads in perfectly to the last part that I was going to talk about. But actually, when I spoke with Peter Senge from MIT, and I spoke around this idea of what does it mean to be present, and he said it's actually a very complex question to answer, but his key point was, and I think it's what you're all touching on, so you're not quite MIT professors yet, but this idea of being listened to, and when you feel listened to, you feel that support. And you have that then genuine connection with your family or your friends or your teachers. So
as Ravelli proposed that question to us, how are you showing up with being present? Here are 3 tips we can use at home with our children at any age. So firstly, say what we see. Rather than imposing your judgment on your child, quite literally vocalize what you see is happening. 2, point out a strength. I'm so happy you did that. I know it's a lot of effort to complete your homework, and some of those questions were quite challenging. You should feel proud, I am. And thirdly, pause, take a breath and listen. When talking to your child, take that moment to be and just hear what they say. And ask yourself, am I actually hearing and listening to what is being said? In 2022, Harvard Business published a paper about different listening styles. As a parent, which one is your default listening style with your child? Are you the analytical listener, or relational, critical, or task-focused listener? By having an understanding and an awareness of the different listening styles, it can help us change our approach and end comments I used to hear from my daughter. Mom, you aren't listening to me. And also, as the quote says down there, silence is one of the greatest arts of conversation. Our next question for Peter is, why are we disconnecting? In January this year, I recently spent a week working with Peter and his team, and a lot of our work revolved around this idea of disconnecting. It even involved a 36-hour silent period to fully disconnect from all external distractions. Not an easy feat, with 35 adults all doing the same thing in one location.
This disconnect to connect, and in a way we're more connected than ever before, but yet we're not really. And it's not just the phone addiction, I don't think, anymore. There was something really interesting just released from the Australian Financial Review that interviewed 3 top company executives about Gen Z, and it said that this generation, this fascinated me, in their workplace nowadays, they need to be provided with a sense of purpose, so they belong and feel connected. And they were talking about, the baby boomer generation. That wasn't necessarily you would just go to work and get your paycheck. And I've been wondering a lot about this idea, particularly around the work that we recently did at the Garrison Institute about disconnecting, but what are kind of some of the causes of why you think we are disconnecting so much, even though we are connected in a way right now with our technology? And this idea, I think, is really important for our young people and important for our parents to grapple with, especially at the moment in everything you see going on in the media at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I remember it was probably 15 years ago, we used to teach a semester-long program called the Leadership Laboratory at the Sloan School of Management at MIT. And students would write regular reflective papers. And it was the first time I encountered this statement in one of the students' papers. This was like 15 years ago, maybe 13 years ago. Students said, the more we're connected, the less we connect. I always remember that because it was quite clear what he was referring to as this kind of, you might say, mediated connection. Everybody's on their social media website. There's all this exchange of statements. But real connection is an experience. It's like what I said before, we all know what it's like to be listened to. That's a fundamental experience of connectedness at the interpersonal level. And I think the problem in one sense is very simple. We have substituted the exchange of messages for really listening to each other. Remember I said before, all listening has the content level, but it has the relational level that sits behind it. You can't do that. The relational level is more fundamental. Think of conversations you've had with somebody speaking a different language that you don't speak very well, but sometimes you have these wonderful conversations. You don't quite understand each other, but you hear each other and you feel each other. We have to remember that words are always secondary in real communication. There is a deeper level. That deeper level has been stripped away. The consequence of that is we feel lonely, isolated. There's an epidemic of loneliness, an epidemic of suicides around the world. Over half of American men in surveys report extended periods of loneliness. Adult men. These include very successful people. So I think that's pretty simple. It's sort of like we've taken the ground out from underneath us and we're floating in space trying to talk and listen to each other, just exchanging symbols, exchanging words. It was never and has never and probably will never be human communication in any fundamental way.
As Peter shared some of his ideas around what it means to be connected and disconnecting, I really liked the idea of how he talked about lived experiences. Here you can see the iconic image taken 25 years ago, Michael Jordan's last shot for the Chicago Bulls. To me, it's a perfect example of being present and living that experience. Now let's fast forward 25 years, pretty much nearly to the day. Here is the Los Angeles Lakers star, LeBron James, has just become the NBA's all-time leading point scorer. The difference between this photo and the one before is the crowd. Every person but one man, the one circled in red, is on their device. My question is, thinking back to what Peter said, who's truly living the experience right now in this moment? So now it's time to hear from Donald, Chloe and Ravelli about what they think it means to be disconnecting in today's world.
Disconnecting, how parents should approach this or how adults should approach this is very different to how students should. And I believe adults should also take the initiative to reach out and try to connect with their kids or with children, but also as teenagers, as children, we should also try to take the initiative and connect to our parents. There's this phrase in Cantonese called "đòi khao," and I think this is a problem which we're trying to address. I think as parents, you should try to be more open and accept the different views which your children have, because well, us as teenagers, we're experiencing new things every single day, and we have a change in perspective for according to the experiences which we have, which are changing every single day. So as parents, I think you need to be able to accept the fact that your child is changing, but also try to help them on their journey to when they're changing, to try to assist them. And on the other hand, as children, we shouldn't be locking ourselves, disconnecting ourselves in real life, because I believe family is also a very important thing. And you should also, as teenagers, we're trying to do this as well, try to connect to our parents, try to understand their needs, try to help them, try to relieve some stress which they might be experiencing. And I guess, yeah, it's a two-sided thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think I'm also like agreeing with both of them, but adding on to Donald's point, I think it's really important to show that mutual respect between parents and children, as I think we all know that times are changing, we have social media, we have a lot of phones, and that means maybe the children are spending a lot more time on their phones or their computers. But I think adults or just parents need to maybe understand that and respect that. And in turn, I think, but again, it's really important to keep that connection that we're talking about. So maybe social media is disconnecting you from real life relationships, but I think it's really important to connect with each other and understand maybe just a simple, like, if you're having dinner together, just asking how your day goes. Yeah.
I also have one point to add on, is that when you have different values, one very big point is that when you're trying to accept it, effective communication is very important, especially between like parents and kids, what we were talking about, especially like teenagers like us, because there's a lot of things that we've experienced that you guys might not have experienced before, such as like COVID. We've lived under COVID. We have lived under COVID education, which I'm sure that a lot of adults have never experienced before. Yeah, Zoom. And so we have experienced a lot. And we're kind of like improving while the time is improving, the society is improving. But in another way, adults might have already stayed in their society, as in like the time. So I think it's very important to have effective communication, to tell about your experiences. So if you're a kid, tell your experiences to the adults, or as an adult, tell your experience to the kids. So then you can actually create like an emotional connection in between.
So I was fortunate to hear the presentation from Kimberly Chaucon-Revel, University of Illinois, Chicago. And Kimberly is involved in longitudinal studies of well-being of young people. She shared how connectedness for all children, especially teenagers coming out the other end of the pandemic, is critical today. Kimberly's study is based in Canada and examined the profiles of social connectedness among adolescents in grade 7 before the pandemic and in grade 8 during the second wave of the pandemic. The one common thread was that the increases of connectedness were associated with improvements in mental well-being. Experiencing connectedness with peers and adults is critical for the mental well-being in early adolescence. And in addition, the sense of belonging and connectedness for young people is so important for a child's well-being that it is now being proven through research that is linked to their academic success at school. So, as parents, how are we showing up regarding our connections for our children? To build stronger connections, we have 3 tips to make it part of your daily interactions with your children. Number 1, set a good example. Our children learn by watching us, so let's make eye contact with them, give them our full attention, and avoid distractions when they are talking to us. As I'm always saying to my husband, let's put down our own device. 2, as Donald spoke about, how can we be open to the changes that they're going through? Be open to learning from someone younger than you. In what ways might your child and you be similar? Also, in what ways might you and your child be different? In what ways might you and your child and you connect as human beings? What can you ask or say or do with your child if you had the chance? And 3, have meaningful and, as Chloe spoke about, respectful conversations. Talk to your children about your experiences, ask about their experiences, and ask thoughtful questions on what's happening in their life, whether it's school, friends, family, local and global issues. And also the key to often conversations with our children is offer no solutions. An important part of building connections is genuinely inquiring, valuing, and listening to our young people. So I asked Peter, what are some of the things he is learning from our young people today? Let's hear what he says.
Is there anything you've taken away recently from some of our youth?
Well, I think first off, this idea of needing to connect is very fundamental. I think basically for the reasons I was just talking about. The young people grow up, they feel it, they see all the difficulties. I mean, obviously, growing up is difficult by its nature. Being a teenager has never been easy anywhere for anybody, right? But it's a time in life to illustrate where we're acutely aware of our relational dynamics. We feel embarrassed, we feel shamed, we're naturally prone to feel disconnected and hurt by others, and we hurt each other. This is just humanness. It's part of the growing up process. But if you're trying to do all that through mediated communication, forget it. I remember a few years ago, a young woman showed me a text message from her boyfriend breaking up. And I thought, oh, isn't that awful? I mean, this is one of the hardest things in the world. Or to break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, we know this is not easy. But to do it in a text message, you had, oh, this is the problem. Kids are acutely aware of this. I think the first thing that stands out, they are acutely aware of this kind of rug being pulled out from underneath them, as I was talking about before, that the importance of the relational dynamic itself beyond the words is not there, and they know it because they're humans. You know, there's a whole body of developmental psychology called attachment theory. It really has to do with how, as little infants, we bond. You know, we're hugged. You know, we all know that conversation with a 9-month-old where you're just mimicking each other. Those dynamics, literally, we now know, shape how the brain develops. They're so fundamental. We are a social species. We grow up socially. When all of a sudden that rug of social relatedness is pulled out from underneath us, we really feel it. And the other thing that really stands out is kids are acutely aware of the conditions of the world. You might say this is a unique moment in history where every child, to some degree, is actually growing up in the world. They're not growing up in Shenzhen or Shanghai or Beijing, or they're growing up in the world. They are local, of course, but they're acutely aware. I've never seen a dialogue circle with young kids, 5 years and older, even 4 nowadays, where climate change doesn't come up. They all know that. Something is going on in our relationship with Mother Earth, and they know that. So these are the two things.
Let's now hear from Donald, Chloe and Ravelli on their response about what are youth saying today, because these are the students who are building a bright future for our humanity.
It's actually going up and up more and more, and then the social media and all that is increasing a lot, you could see. So I think that influences a lot in our values, because you have a lot more information obtained, so then it actually more fulfills our perspective as well. So usually what I would say in a situation is that I only based on my perspective, but through the social media and all the other news medias, so you're able to understand how other people think. And it's actually a very big part, because you could evaluate about your perspective and the other's perspective as well. So it actually helps us to build our critical thinking skills as well, I would say.
That's true. I would like to add, so as of right now, I'm doing a GP project on social media and about its effects on teenagers, which are what we are. We're teenagers right now. And after some research, I found out that social media has become a integrated part of our lives. And compared to my dad or my parents' generation, the way that they perceive the world are through their family, their friends, and in school. But for us, as Chloe mentioned, our worlds are more revolving around social media. And I like to say it's globalization, because just going on YouTube, we'll know how Americans live their lives, how Chinese people live their lives, how Australian people live their lives. And it really makes us more, I'd say, mature in that sense, but also causes us to sort of deviate from our homes and the people around us, and feel more addicted sort of onto social media, which is a problem that I feel like our generation has to face. What about you, Emma?
Yeah, so just emphasizing maybe on how now we have social media and globalization has made that happen. I feel like sometimes social media, even though it can provide you with a lot of sources and pretty much we can see everything around the world, like we know what's happening right now in the UK, in America, etc. But it can also allow us to maybe, again, deviate from our connections in real life. Since now a lot of people are just texting or calling on social media instead of actually maybe going to hang out or talk in real life.
As adolescents represent 16% of our population, their opinions matter. Here are some reflective questions for every parent joining our webinar this evening. What would it be like if I was more present with? What would change if I was better connected to? Suppose that I started asking open-ended questions to hear the thoughts of. How would it be if I showed up differently with? Finally, I asked Peter one final question to pose to all our community members. So you can think about this question yourself, and hopefully you can take it back to your own son or daughter and think, how am I going to listen, show up to their response, and deeply connect to what their thoughts and views are? Let's hear from Peter.
Yeah, well, I think given everything I know about the school and the whole network of schools, I would just anchor on the obvious one, which is for you as students, what's the meaning of really being in a bilingual education that's trying to lay a foundation of understanding East and West? Why does that matter? I mean, what does it mean for you personally? What's it like to go through it? I'm sure there are challenges. But also, why does it feel to you like this is important?
So thank you for joining us this evening to hear about the ideas of disconnect to connect and understanding our children. As our children grow, we travel along the journey alongside them. And just a reminder, as Peter said, that being a teenager has never been easy anywhere, anytime, anywhere in the world. But also, let's remind ourselves, being a parent anytime, anywhere in the world has never been easy either. But one thing that we can try to do is think about how we are present with our children, how we're connected, and how we're open with them as well. Let's try to understand our children more by listening to them and seeing what they can actually teach us. So thank you very much for your presence this evening and your connection online, and let's hope that we can build those strong, loving, and family relational connections with our children.
So thank you so much, Ms. Julia Kortt, for your enlightening presentation on the concept of disconnect to connect. Your knowledge has sparkled a lively exchange of ideas and contemplation within our audience. So we have a few questions submitted by our participants to promise to add further layers to our conversations, and we're eager to delve into these questions. So I'd like to thank our audience first for their active participations, and I'm excited to hear Ms. Kortt to elaborate on her insights. So hi, Ms. Kortt. So one of the questions I received from our participant is, should I restrict my children from using social media?
Yes, that's often a very asked question about the idea of restrict or restriction. And I think one of the key points is we can't restrict. We can to a certain point, but if we do restrict, it only makes it more challenging, the relationship with our child, as well as them wanting to do more. So maybe the idea is, instead of restricting it, is how can we educate them together about appropriate use of social media and learning with them. They'll probably know a lot more than we will about social media. So find out about the information from them, as well as some other experts, and talk about the awareness as opposed to restriction for uses of social media.
Yes. So one of the questions that parents are more concerned of is, when using social media and mobile devices, they get less interactions with other peers and other people. So how can I, as a caregiver or as a parent, to encourage my child to interact more with other people, let's say face to face?
Yes, I think that's a really good question. And I think if you look around in society, one thing that you'll notice is, for example, when you go on the train yourself, look around, and what is everybody on is their devices. So our children look up to the adults. They look at the mums and dads, they look at their caregivers, their older brothers and sisters, and what are they saying? So if they themselves are seeing a lot of adults in their life on devices, that modeled behaviour will come down to what they decide to do. So as a family, it's good to really think about, when are you using your device around your child or your teenager, and how can you think about different ways that you are interacting more with people face to face, and then actually have those conversations when maybe you're out for dinner. You might see another family and they might all be on their devices. Talk about how that changes the interactions of dinner time at the restaurant together. Or when you're on the train, do you notice to see a lot of people on their devices? It's about bringing those conversations to the forefront of your family unit and talking about the differences of how we can have more face-to-face communication. And I think it's important to encourage our students, and as well, whether they're young, to be having lots of play dates with their friends after school, and teenagers is getting them active and interacting with their peers as well.
So the next question kind of echoes with your answer just now, saying that it is important for caregivers and parents to build up this relationship with their child. But it is often challenging due to various reasons, let's say generation gap or other reasons as well. So one of the parents asked, in what ways can I develop a closer relationship with my own child?
I definitely understand that, because I'm an older mum. I'm a full-time working mum, and I'm very, very busy, like I'm sure all of our parents are. So for me, it's about how are we intentionally listening in and leaning into what our child's interests are. So really finding out what they're interested in. A small example I can give you is my young son is very interested in space. So how can I really encourage that interest with him? By finding opportunities to find him books on space, to read them to him, to take him to museums around that. My daughter, who's older, I'm trying to really lean in and have those conversations. What are her and her friends talking about? What are they engaging with? They're starting to go through kind of pre-teen stages, but it's about making those intentional times to find out their interests. And as we heard from Peter, am I really listening to what my child is saying? And if I'm listening, how am I picking up on that key information to then spend that time around their interests?
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Well, as a mother and as a educator, right? We're kind of facing the situation where schools are using more smart devices as a tool for teaching. So we cannot really separate mobile devices and education now. But then to really have our child engage with the real world with their peers, it is a fact that they need to use less mobile devices. So do you have any tips on how we can limit our children to use apps on devices, or to use to reduce the usage of their iPads or their mobile phones?
Yeah, exactly right. From a school context, of course, we're using technology to deepen our students' learning. That's really important. But when it comes to device time at home for our students, are they being a passive user, or are they actively creating and really engaging and learning from it? So that's kind of the question I ask myself when I'm looking at how are they using the iPad. If they're on the iPad and they're just continually scrolling through or just watching different YouTube video clips, then they're being passive. they're not really engaging, they're not creating. And that's the type of interactions on an iPad that we really don't want with our students, particularly with the algorithms that can be connected to teenagers and the different interests that come out and then can lead them kind of down different areas where we don't want them going. That's kind of one piece that I think that's really important. I think the other piece is showing your child the functions within the device where they can help track. How long have you been on the device for when you go into your settings? Oh, I've been on for 3 hours. Okay, well, let's look at what you've been using. And then when they can open up the different bar charts, they can say, oh, I've actually spent the last 2 hours on this app here, which hasn't been a really productive use of my time. How can you then put better parameters in place yourself? What would be a good agreement you can create? And so it's these conversational pieces that I think that are really helpful to have, is showing them and explaining why. As mentioned earlier, the restricting is not going to be the answer. It's how we can work with it. And also, how can you have device-free time? So we have, at the moment, we have no device allowed 3 days a week. So it depends on when that will be. It might be all Saturday and all Sunday. And then that includes us as well as parents. So it's the modelling as well.
Right. So the next question is, I think most parents are most concerned with, or one of the questions that are often asked. Many parents or many audience today, like yourself, Julia, are working dads and working moms. So how, or do you have any tips on how to balance your own work-life pressure, with your family?
Absolutely. I think this took me a while to come to this point as a working mother who has a quite extensive travel schedule as well, being away from home. And often as parents, we think we need to put our family's needs above our own, which we do. However, we need to practice self-compassion for ourselves. We need to know that if we don't look after ourselves, if we don't carve out time of what we need, then we're actually going to be no good for anybody within our family, whether that's our children, our work colleagues, or our partner. So we need to find that time where we practice self-compassion for ourselves, and it can be something really small. It might be, I need to just log off early from the computer, from the work emails, and not switch them on again until I get back to the office desk. Is it that important? They can contact me on my phone. I also think that the way that we have some alone time and create some physical activity in our life is super important. Now, my children see that. They say, oh, mum's going to be going out and doing some exercises. So it's the modelling as well. But there's always that example, and my husband always says to me, if you're in a plane, whose air mask do you put on first? You have to put your own on. And if you're always doing everything else for your children, at the end of the day, then you're not going to be in the best place for them, for your work colleagues. So it might sound like a little bit of selfish, but I think it comes back to this idea of self-compassion, and we ourselves have to look after ourselves first so we can be the best for everybody else.
I totally agree with you, Julia, on that one. It is important. It's not, I don't think it's selfish, but like you said, we need to present the best of ourselves to be able to, deal with or handle with our child or our family or our colleagues, So last but not least, us as educators, we have always been emphasizing on the importance of building up that school and family relations. So one of the questions our parents ask is, who can I contact at my child's school for additional support or advice on any matters?
That's a really great question. I think importantly is, firstly, reach out to your child's teacher, because if you think about the number of hours a day that they spend with their kind of core teacher, whether it's in the early years or the primary years, that would be the first point of contact. Now, obviously in secondary setting, our students are seeing many different types of teachers, but we're fortunate within all of our network of schools that we have our different year level leaders, and they would be the person that you could be contacting for additional support, and they would be either referring you to the student's homeroom teacher. But then within our school, we also have well built out wellness and life skills programs. So there are, if we need to escalate, people that have more of a professional level of student counselling that we can also go to within our different networks of schools. And I think that sometimes as parents, we can't work it out and we don't have the answer. And that's why we must have that open communication. I've been an educator for 20 years, but when it comes to dealing with my own children and their problem, I'm first running to their teacher, because their teacher will know what's happened better and be able to support and guide me. So when you're in the parent driving seat, it's very, very different, the dynamics of the teacher and the student relationship. So always be going to that first point of communication.
So always the teachers first.
Always the teachers, because they're the ones have that really close, caring relationship of your child. And they can sometimes have a very different perspective. And they might be saying to me, Julia, I think you just need to relax on this point. He's not exhibiting that at school, but maybe he is at home. Or sometimes it's like, yes, we need to look further into this. Thank you so much for bringing it to our attention. And then having those conversations together.
Right. So thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your valuable perspectives and answering all these fruitful questions. I believe that your answers have certainly enriched our comprehension of the nuances involved in understanding our children in today's world. So I would like to also express my gratitude to our audience for their engaging involvement and thoughtful questions posted. So as we conclude today's Q&A sessions, let us really take a moment to ponder the ideas exchanged today and explore ways to integrate these understanding into our interactions with our own child. So a heartfelt thank you to all of you for contributing to the depth and the success of today's discussion on disconnecting to connect. So thank you, Julia.